Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone from the UN Women Training Center. My name is Leticia Berrizbeitia. I am the Capacity Development Analyst at UN Women Training Center. It is our pleasure to welcome you today to this online conversation on sticky issues for gender trainers. This webinar also wishes to bring your attention to the blended course that UN Women Training Center and the Royal Tropical Institute KID will offer this fall, the Certified Professional Development Program for Gender Trainers. So, before we get started, a few remarks on how webinars work. You will notice there is a toolbar at the right side of your screen with a space for typing in your questions. Please know you can type questions and comments at any time during the webinar. We will keep an eye on them and compile them for the panelists to answer at the end of the presentations. I would also like to inform you that this session is being recorded. It will be posted later today on our UN Women Training Center YouTube channel. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Alicia Ziffer, who will introduce today's panelist. Alicia, you're unmuted now. Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. I'm very glad to join everybody in this webinar where we'll be discussing the joint program that KID and the Royal Tropical Institute and UN Women Training Center have on our certification program for gender trainers. This webinar, let me introduce colleagues who will be the panelists for today. Matrayi Mokapaya is a PhD social anthropologist in social development with a focus on gender development. She has 30 years of experience in gender and she has 30 years of experience in gender and development research, advisory work, teaching, and training. She has her concerns in rights in citizenship and rights in development and integration of equity concerns across in policy development, program and project planning, monitoring, and evaluation. She has extensive experience and skills in applied and action-oriented research, teaching and training, and has several publications in her field of expertise. She has worked in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East with multilateral and bilateral agencies, national governments, international and national non-governmental organizations on a broad range of development issues. Our other Matrayi is a senior advisor in the Department of Gender in the Royal Tropical Institute in KID. Our other panelist for today is Franz Wong. He's also a PhD and is a senior development and gender equity advisor and KID gender team coordinator currently. He has worked in development for over 25 years and as a gender specialist since 2002. In Africa, Asia, Middle East, and has 20 years experience in gender training as designer, trainer of trainers, and researcher, as well as an academic lecturer. Franz is also gender and organizational change specialist with expertise in gender mainstreaming policy and strategy, research and assessment, gender audits, and capacity development for gender equality. He has trained in a variety of organizational settings, including UN agencies, NGOs, government ministries, and international research organizations. So welcome all to this webinar today. And Matrayi and Franz, I would like to ask you, what is the inspiration for this program?
Thank you, Alicia. I'll start and Franz will pick up. Well, we are actually, we try to conceive this program from, to answer the question and to challenge what gender training has come to mean and what actually should it be achieving. We wanted to bring feminist politics back into gender training for development, by which we mean the theoretical concepts that have animated gender knowledge and in development. So these concepts are centrally about theories of knowledge, about social relations, and the relationship to development. What we want to do is to help participants and work together with them to develop fluency, conceptual fluency, so they can then interrogate, question the work that they are doing in such a way as to put feminist knowledge frameworks back into their training practice. It actually means that we go fundamentally to theories of knowledge. We question the nature of truth and the nature of the truth that is used in development about gender and gender relations, how it has been arrived at, and how it's, is when you say this is what men and women do or gender relations is, what tests has that truth had to pass. So, and we've often find today that since we are always asked to do gender and something training and never gender training by itself, we are having to use the same paradigms and hegemonic ways and dominant worldviews that are expressed in the disciplines to which we are asked to give gender training. Whereas gender training is all about trying to, or rather gender knowledge is about challenging those dominant paradigms and challenging power relationships. So that's what we wanted to do, and that was why we conceived this course, because there's a lack of that kind of approach.
Maybe to build upon it a little bit, what we recognize is that, well, since the decades of gender and development being introduced to gender mainstreaming, there has been, of course, a large community of gender trainers. How they've come to become gender trainers has been through different paths. Much of it, as we know from studies being conducted at the Geneva Study Center, a Gender Study Center in Geneva, I should say, and also IGA, the European Institute for Gender Equality, is that gender trainers come through their work on the job. They picked up, they've learned from others, of course they've prepared themselves and read, but what they haven't had so much, or for many, is this conceptual foundation from which to engage with gender ideas with participants. They have a lot of practice and, of course, analysis through that practice. But what we're trying to build is, as Moitri says, is a fluency in gender concepts and gender analysis so that they themselves are able to work with others to develop that. So it's just not a matter of repeating definitions, but really understanding the fluency. And part of that fluency is also understanding the continuity of some of these gender ideas and concepts, that they aren't binaries, they aren't either or. Because what we've observed is that gender in training and how it's understood or conveyed ends up becoming binaries. It's either gender or sex. It's either men or women. It's access or control. And in fact, these concepts their analytical power comes within their sort of fluidity of these. And that's we're hoping that trainers can become fluent in those concepts as a way to then retain that analytical power of these ideas that are foundational to our work, none the least being, as Moichi alluded to, sort of feminist understandings of different knowledges and ways of knowing and how these actually compete with each other.
Yes, and just to underscore that, like for example, when you are asked to train, like we are doing at present, agricultural scientists on gender, the issue there is, of course, their paradigm of knowledge is very, very different to that which gender knowledge can even enter into. So without this fluency, you don't know where they're coming from actually, and why the definitional mode and kind of gender being about categories results from the way we use gender and development in development.
And to extend on that example of what you covered, Alicia, so the program is really about developing that analytical insight to understand what's going on. It's not so much that, these people don't get gender, but actually the reason why they are struggling with the ideas and wanting tools or quick fixes or, strict definitions is because, as Mochi was mentioning, from the different development paradigms coming from. And as a trainer, how do you detect that and analyze that and work with where people are at as a way of so that they can see other ways of knowing, which they may or may not accept, but at least they're able to see these other ways of knowing.
You'd like to? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, please.
No, I think we have already addressed this a bit, but maybe if we could focus more on the needs that the program wants to address more specifically.
Yeah. Well, we are looking at very specific needs and as we develop this. So as some of you are aware that the program is targeted to mid and senior experienced trainers. And what we're looking for are a community of trainers who have this experience, can under their belt, so to speak, and speak to it, but more so are looking for ways to re-engage the foundations of gender and development, to reclaim the transformatory potential, the feminist transformatory potential of gender training. So it's really people who have been around the block a few times perhaps and are looking at ways to reconnect, to revive, to rebuild, if not in some ways, strengthen their conceptual understandings. And so it's not just about concepts, it's also now about methods in a sense of, because we're trying to redraw upon the feminist intent of gender mainstreaming and gender development, it's how do you do so then with different techniques? How do you do so in ways of understanding different forms of knowledge? So it's really the application of this analysis to the act of training. So it's both what people are training on in terms of their analysis and content, but also the act of training. And that's one of the needs that we want to be connecting with. And building through this process a cadre of trainers who are really building a solid foundation and connecting with others and building this sort of peer group of trainers. So that's the other need that we're trying to do. And as you can see, it is part of this wider agenda of really questioning through gender training dominant development paradigms. And that's what so there is a movement of sorts underlying in the inspiration of this program.
Thank you. You mentioned that this program was for mid and experienced trainers. Can you expand a little bit more on who the program is for and what people might expect from this program as well?
Yes, we would like to work with people who have some experience of gender training and have noticed and are feeling the need for new understandings, new skills in order to make their trainings more transformatory, more understandable, and better conceived conceptually. So we are really looking for middle and experienced trainers. But this is not a training on gender. It's a training on gender and training for gender trainers. And so which means that the expectation that people will have some experience of training holds. The other reason why we're looking for people who have had some experience of training and have, as Franz likes to call it, gone around the block a few times, is because the whole program is about the process of what we call co-creation. It uses feminist ideas of practice And I think co-creation is one of them. Co-creation is not put everybody's ideas together, shake, and then you have, take the common denominator. It can't, it's not that. It's that because the struggling to understand the socially constituted nature of gender relations and how this might apply to gender training programs that we are doing in various different disciplines. And it's a conscious act, and it requires both, and it's for each person, each participant, it's new. So the interaction between the participants and the trainers is creating a new situation where the person is learning about and is as well as the facilitators learning about how to use the socially constituted form of relations, gender relations, the socially constituted relations in their training as the fundamental basic kind of framework. So
maybe I can build upon that. So what can people expect? Well, we're hoping that we'll all be challenged ourselves as well, both in terms of our core beliefs and understandings and our ability to learn, to listen, because we do want a diversity of understandings and voices in the room. So to be challenged in terms of our conceptual understandings, but also in terms of our practice. And in fact, we don't see those as separate. So what people can expect is a real active interaction between theory and practice. The way this program is designed is that people will be doing actual assignments, they will be doing training on their own in their own work, but building upon and reflecting upon that through the different modules, which you can explain later. So certainly there's that part of the active learning and doing. It's also, people can expect to be challenged in terms of learning in different ways, as Moichi mentioned, not only in terms of co-creation, but in terms of thinking about their role as trainers and the real contradictions that I'm sure many of the listeners can relate to about being in an industry of which, for example, their livelihoods depend, of which they get their recognition from, but also what they're trying to change in effect, and change or transform if they're about gender transformatory work. And how do you do that in a way through reflective practice, for example? And how do you do that in a way that's constantly thinking about your position? So again, it's these feminist ideas about reflexivity and positionality that we want to bring into the practice of training. So once again, it's about what can people expect to be learning, to be challenged, to be inspired, because we do want to bring together a group of 30 trainers from around the world who are asking these questions and wanting to be revived and rejuvenated and re-energized.
Thank you. So considering this and the challenge that participants will have, could you tell us more about what the specific role would be, what they will have to undertake, and how the program will be structured?
Right. Okay. For that, I'll just ask you if you don't mind to pass over the controls to us so people can see our screen.
Okay. Yes, we will be doing that
right now. Okay, here we go. All right.
Yes.
So do you want to go?
yes. So as you can see, these are the program domains. One specific body is developing the conceptual depth and clarity, so that one can be fluid in this, fluent in this, and be able to use it in practice. The second is that we try to understand training as well as the material we're using through the use of feminist practices like reflexivity, co-creation, and of course a large part of the whole thing, because this is about gender trainers, is about the training methods. What are these training methods that are suited to this approach of bringing feminist politics back into gender training? Okay. Can you give us the structure? Sure. Want to talk to the structure?
Sure. Okay, so see if I can do this in an efficient way. So overall, it's a 6-month program, and there are 3 modules, which I'll just give you an overview now of, sorry. So we have the first one at the top, which is Module 1, Theoretical Perspectives of Gender and Development, which is followed some 2 months later by Module 2, which is Development Sectors from a Gender Perspective, and that's a virtual model. The third and last module is Policy and Practice in International Development, which is a face-to-face module. So modules 1 and 3, so 1 and 3, are 1-week face-to-face workshops in Amsterdam at KIT, and the second module in the middle is virtual, which is Development Sectors from a gender perspective. The first module is about the, theoretical perspective. So it's this building and strengthening of the conceptual foundations with, of course, practice sessions. So really trying to see how do these concepts work out in practice. In between module 1 and 2, is our homework assignments. It's really linking the theoretical perspectives in module 1 to how they apply to particular sectors in development. And these sectors will be identified based on participants' interests. And they'll be working on them as part of their assignments, supported through virtual learning from us here in the Netherlands and other guest resource people, but as well as peer mentoring. So there will be an opportunity for participants to be talking with each other, discussing each other, and working through the assignments. And then, as I mentioned in Module 2, we'll be looking at specific development sectors and looking at it from a different perspective. And then it comes then to the homework assignment in between Modules 2 and 3. That homework assignment is actually participants working on a particular either training module or training, bringing in these different ways of thinking about content and methods, design, and then that takes them into Module 3, which is then the policy and practice in international development, where people will be presenting their assignments, but also their reflections on the assignments and how they thought about their assignments in different ways and what were some of the sticky issues. But overall, this module is also geared about, well, now that we want to be acting a bit more, for lack of a better word, subversively, well, how do you do so now within the context of development? And coming back to the mainstream of what we're doing, which is the development sector. So that is the focus of Module 3. So in summary, 3 modules. 2 modules are face-to-face in Amsterdam. 1 module, Module 2, is a 4-week virtual module. And in between the modules are virtual sessions for learning, exchanging, and short instructional inputs from the main instructors and resource people. I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Franz. Yes, I think this brings quite a clear picture of what will be happening from the moment that the program starts and during the several months that this program lasts. So one more question is, why should people choose this program for gender trainers and not others?
Yes, I would say that actually from the mapping we did and from the interviews of gender trainers that we've done building up to this, nobody's happy. You know, they're so dissatisfied with what they're doing. They're so, they feel that the feminist transformatory goals do not work themselves out in their training. It's more checklists, more tools, and more definitions without understanding what's behind it. Also, in order to apply training, the concepts to any particular discipline, whether it be HIV/AIDS, sexual and reproductive rights, or agriculture, one does need this fluency, as I've been saying. And it becomes more exciting to see what are their thought practices in the particular, among the trainees that you're addressing. How can gender be best understood to apply to their situation. Okay.
I guess the other point is built upon that is in fact, we really resisted calling this a training of trainers. That's conveys a much more sort of a linear process of how you work with trainers. It's just not a matter of me training Moichi or Moichi training someone else, right? It's actually about this co-creation process, A. B, it's about being explicit about this is about reclaiming the feminist potential of gender training. And that's why we're very pleased to be working with you and Women Training Center, because the Training Center itself also has this explicit agenda. So it's really being clear about what this is. Secondly, is how does this again reflected in the design and the pedagogy of the program? And so again, it's not just talking about feminist theory and teaching everybody or lecturing people. It's actually using different ways of learning and knowledge building and knowledge strengthening that reflects these ideas about different types of knowledge and how you resist one type of knowledge or one definition.
Dominant type of knowledge.
Dominant type of knowledge. So it's really trying to, in a sense, practice what we're preaching in the design and the pedagogy of the program itself. And I think that itself is different.
So I think that's why people who are dissatisfied with the present mode of gender training, what has become of it, should apply for this course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all this information. We are very glad as Training Center also to be developing and implementing this course jointly. I think we have now some comments and questions from participants that we would like to address as much as possible. Please note that maybe we will not be able to address all the questions and comments, but we will be doing so by email format and in different ways. So thank you, Leticia, for putting our questions online now. We will be putting them a little bit bigger, perfect. So we will be looking at them so that maybe we can check some of them. Let me see. France and Nathalie, let's see. Does UN Women recommend a certain program or training for entry-level trainers? Okay, this is something we will address separately because it doesn't really pertain this course.
We can maybe just answer the real quick ones and let those go. So unfortunately, the training the program is in English. But actually, even as we speak, we're actually talking to a university in Latin America to offer something similar in Latin America, but we want to do it first. So if you can hold on to that, we'll hopefully be able to say yes at some points. People will be, this is a certified gender course. And to be clear, it's not an accredited course. So people will not be receiving credits that we could put towards, university or, But it is a certified course and a certificate course that would be given by KIT and UN Women. And people will be certified on two levels. One is their completion and attendance of the program. Second is their mastery or fluency of concepts. So there will be external examiners involved in seeing how people are able to be fluent in the ideas that we'll be talking about and approaches that we'll be talking about in the program. Do you want to take another one?
Yeah. I would like to take talking about the sticky points, what challenges have been seen in gender training. Well, we were just talking about those. The fact that, the whole purpose of feminist knowledge was to dismantle, undo these binary categories and these either-ors, and to leave the analytical categories very, very unstable, because gender is about the socially constituted relations that are context-specific and historically situated. So what applies in one situation doesn't apply in another. We do need to actually try and understand, get to the bottom of it. So yes, somebody's asked the issue of gender mainstream versus women empowerment, for example. The issue here is not one or the other. What has happened to gender mainstreaming and why we are saying that people find it frustrating is because we have had to mainstream gender into, we have had to do gender in a mainstream discipline. And then mainstream discipline has its own knowledge structure and has power relations therein because knowledge is power. Whereas if gender is about talking about and analyzing the socially constituted relations and using feminist knowledge for that, for emancipation. I think it is always for empowerment and emancipation of people. Then we have to go about understanding gender knowledge in another way. And then the issues of gender mainstreaming, what should be mainstreaming, excuse me, gender or affecting the mainstream. Women's empowerment, how do we understand that? In what situation, in what context does a model for empowerment which works in one place apply to another? So in all these we question and we teach people in their training to raise not only the questions but the several alternatives that are there. So yes, of course, these are some of the sticky points. People are not happy. People see that they feel disempowered in training situations. People see that they cannot engage with the mainstream frameworks. Yeah. So when we do gender training, we do transformatory training and we address all development. We actually question development. Okay.
Maybe the UN questions we can leave aside, or no, we say we're not, I guess, in a position to speak about whether UN Women requires a certain training or credentialing.
Maybe I can address that a little bit more, and I would like to add what to the reflections and the responses that Matei was giving on the issues of gender mainstreaming versus women empowerment, that the aim of this course is really to provide trainers with the tools, the skills, and the knowledge, let's say, to really be able to disentangle these issues themselves, and so that the sticky point, when we're looking at somebody to tell us what the sticky, how to and make these points unsticky, if we can call it that way, but like to really be able to drive a process in which we can lead stakeholders in untangling all these issues that I think need a lot of thought, and many times we don't have a straight answer. Each process is unique in itself, and there's no recipes. There may be guidance, there might be tools, but we need trainers with sufficient knowledge and capacity to be able to go through this process itself. Regarding the questions on the needs for credentialing from the UN side, I just want to highlight that UN Women and of course KIT as well, and this is why we have joined forces for this course and for this initiative. We're very concerned with the quality of gender training, and we have a firm belief that the quality depends a lot on the trainer. So while if we have really high quality trainers that have been able to go through a reflective process and a hands-on and conceptual learning process as we are planning with this course, we think that this will be a way to ensure quality and to improve the quality of the trainings that are delivered. So this is our main concern, and this will be something added and an added value, of course, for consultants and trainers that have to compete for trainings and all that. But this is really like a belief in that quality of training depends a lot on the quality of the trainers as well. I hope that this clarifies a little bit more that point. Oh, we have more questions. Very interesting.
Shanu from Dhaka. Hi, Shanu.
Okay, we have some very in-depth questions that I don't know if we will be able to address. Of course, all the information will be sent to all participants and will be posted. It's in the KIT web page and also in the UN Women Training Center page. And we will be, and information is also available through social media.
Okay. Maybe just quickly surveying the questions. Yes, certainly the course is open to freelance trainers as well as staff trainers. And we are looking for people, as I mentioned before, with mid-senior level training experience. But then you ask, what is gender training? Well, we have the fairly mainstream gender training, but we would also like to invite people to participate with other gender training type or gender training related experience. So for example, maybe it's training in women's leadership or training in women's rights. I think what we're trying to aim for are different ways of thinking about gender training and thinking about gender knowledge, and so we certainly would welcome those people. And the funny question is, how do you take your own positionality into account when working as a gender trainer? Absolutely, that's one of the sort of sticky questions, because it is a delicate and sticky situation as being a trainer. I mean, some of those sticky issues that someone was talking about before was, gender training a lot of times is seen as performative. It's something you're judged on your performance as opposed to what you know or how you're able to analyze. You're judged on what your evaluations say, that people really thought that, I don't know, Franz really actually someone told me that I didn't smile enough one time. So, there is this performance element. There's also the element where you're working in an industry and through a technology of the industry, training, to in some ways question that industry in ways that knowledge is being conveyed and thought of. So that is another sticky issue. Last but not least, as gender trainers, our livelihoods depend on having jobs as trainers. So how do you both be, in some ways, asking difficult questions, asking people to ask difficult questions, but in ways that's being embraced and you're not being, and have you be disruptive, but yet still remain in a system you're trying to disrupt?
Yeah, I see that there's questions about financial assistance too. We just want to say that at present we don't have any scholarships, but we have approached a number of donors, and we hope to be able to do so. We would like people to apply on the based on their experience and on their interests. And once we are, because we're looking for a diversity of backgrounds, and if and when we get some money for scholarships, we will definitely let you know, and it will be, we will have to prioritize on institutional and southern voices, definitely. Yeah.
The one question maybe for Alicia, for you, we weren't sure is, so if people wanted to know more, would they get the link to the website and registration site through the original invitation, or how do they do that through the webinar?
Well, the webinar invitation has included, I think, the link to the site where the online form for application was. But in any case, for anybody attending the webinar, we will be sending afterwards an email with all the information and the link to the site and on the application form. So that would be shared so that you can look at it more closely. You will have a link for more questions, of course, if necessary, and also the application form where you can apply and start collecting all the information that might be needed for this application form.
And maybe one of the last questions is, how is development being conceived, and will this program be useful for gender trainers working UN contexts? I think we can relate to that. We can actually talk about those two questions together. Our role is not to be necessarily saying a dimension of development, but really it's actually how do you use a feminist analysis to question development, understand how development works, and how it works for women's rights or not. So I think it's also about developing that critical analysis, whether you're in the UN or not, or for bilateral agency. So we certainly do and hope that gender trainers from the UN system will be interested. We will have some special sessions specifically designed for working within particular development contexts, the UN being one, but it's not exclusively for the UN system. We do expect others from NGOs, bilateral agencies that we've seen already in different types of organization settings, which in itself is very interesting to really understand how these settings are greater or to a lesser degree conducive for gender transformatory work.
Yeah, I think that this diversity of participants that we're trying to achieve, trans and maturity, will be one of the key to the richness and the success of the program, because this exchange that can be generated is really what makes us have a more clear understanding of the complete context and picture. And each side, from our own stand, we can get a better view and really learn from each other, and also participants to have a peer-to-peer learning process as well.
Yes, there's also a practical question about online training. And as we explained when we showed the structure of the course, between module 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, it's mainly online. There are only 2, and actually module 2 is totally online. So in that sense, we are hooking on to this possibility, and it helps us to expand the program yes, not make it too expensive.
Just one last, as much as this is about co-creation and learning from each other, I should also mention that we'll be involving a number of resource people to also provide their perspectives, and perhaps from a different vantage point. For example, I can see Lucy Ferguson is one of the questioners. Lucy is one of the resource people who has done a lot of thinking about how gender training is structured within the UN system. So certainly she would be brought in. Anne-Marie Gertz has done a lot of work also with the UN system and thinking about gender education more widely. Gloria Bonder will be also talking about really from a feminist perspective. So we are bringing in different people in addition to the participants themselves to enrich that discussion.
Yeah, and also looking for diversity of regions and expertise from our resource team as well.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay. So Franz, Madri, would you like to make any further comments or maybe just clarify other issues? We know that there are some questions that have been unanswered, and we apologize, but we have a time frame for this meeting. We will be getting back to those specific people that have asked questions with information as much as possible.
Are there any specific questions that, Alicia, from your point of view, that really need discussion here? You could point them out to me. Otherwise, what I really want to say, our teaching pedagogy, or rather our learning pedagogy, is very, very central to what we're trying to do. And it's this whole process of co-creation. It's this whole process of reflexivity, which we think that is essential when people are trying to understand and work with concepts and enter into the paradigms, dominant paradigms of development, in order to ask the right questions, so that somebody just asked, Lucy has asked, how is developing being conceived? But in all the documents, behind all the documents, somehow development is about greater justice, equality, and rights for all peoples, and inclusion, so people can belong and not be threatened because of their gender, because of other identities. So in that sense, I think that our training pedagogy assumes a very central position, and that's why we would suggest that it would really be enriched with the participation of really diverse people from really diverse backgrounds and from different corners of the world.
Maybe on a more practical matter, so I appreciate that we're obviously a professional development course in the true sense of the word, that it is for people working, who are professionals working in this area. And that obviously means people have time constraints. And we recognize that this is quite a demanding course, and the reading that people will have to do in preparation. But we've also tried to take that into account, hence the 6 months, so it's spread over a period. Secondly, the assignments will be based on people's actual work, so it's not as if they have to take on additional or new activities, but they'll probably be thinking about them, hopefully, and doing them in different ways. We will, for the virtual sessions, be recording them, so as much as we would like people to participate in real time, there will be an archive of lectures and discussions that people can get to when they can, because if they're traveling or with time zones. So we're aware of, on the one hand, that we're making this quite rigorous and demanding, at least in terms of people's thinking and analysis, but the other hand, that of course people have real lives and work to do, and trying to strike a balance between those, which we'll do our best as facilitators and instructors to facilitate the learning and help people along without sacrificing the quality of the learning.
Yeah, maybe one more, Madre, you were asking like specific information, like very on dates. Application for the course is open until July 30th and the course will be starting on the 23rd of October. And that will be when the first session will start, first face-to-face session that will take place in Amsterdam, in Kit. So this is the first face-to-face session, as was mentioned before, will take 1 week long, 5 days from Monday to Friday. So this is when the course would be starting and would be finishing over in April in 2018. So this information will also be available and sent to everybody, but just to remind that there's time to apply until July 30th.
Great.
Okay, so I think we are going to end now. Thank you everybody for connecting to this webinar. Please for connecting to this webinar, joining us today in this discussion. Thank you for all the very interesting questions that also are very key for us to continue thinking and to gear our program and to bring in additional thoughts to the program that I'm sure will be very interesting indeed.
Thank you everybody for joining us.
Okay,
thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Bye.